This is my backyard. Now it's like most others in the neighborhood. It has a trampoline, a porch with a grill, a nice little garden area, and a place to sit around a campfire. But what makes this backyard different is that it also has my knife making shop. I consider this to be kind of like a second business or side hustle, and business is slow. And today I'm sitting around praying that the phone will ring.
Yo, what's up, bro?
Yo, what up, boss player? Hey, I was wondering, are you still taking like 2 to 3 to 4 weeks to make a tool to cut open a box or cut some tape?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yo, cool, because I got another job for you, man. I want you to take some old blades and turn them into some new blades for me to cut open a box or cut some tape. Are you down, playboy?
Oh, hell yeah.
KY jelly, 2 for $1.
Hell yeah.
80,000 impressions later.
Now, all of this happened about a month ago, and to bring you up to speed, this is the profile that he wants me to make. He also supplied the bandsaw blade material, and in last week's episode, I took the time to create the Damascus billet. So that is where we are starting for today's episode. We already have the billet made and profiled out. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so we are ready to throw in the preheat treat bevels. I'm going to go ahead and scribe a center line. In order to get a good center line, normally you would measure the width of the cutting edge or the blade portion with a set of calipers like this. A whole 1/4 of an inch, and you would half that to 1/8 inch. And then scribe your line. But because this has a little bit of a distal taper, especially towards the tip, your line would get a little weird. Well, that is where this tool comes in handy. These are super inexpensive and they work really great because pretty much put them on to the cutting edge and then turn it to where the wheels hug the side. And then this little scribe that is poking out the center will stay in the center as you run it down the middle of your blade. So you get a perfectly centered line running right down the center of the cutting edge. Oops. So there we go. Now we don't have to worry about that taper. We can clearly see where the center is. I got off a little bit on the tip there, but it definitely works really well to keep the center all the way throughout a blade that kind of has a natural distal taper. I'll put a link in the description if you guys are interested in picking one of these up. They're super inexpensive and they really do come in handy for stuff like this. Let's go ahead, throw on our file guide where we want the plunge lines to start, and we'll get to grinding the preheat treat bevels. So here I am breaking this hard corner on an old used belt. If I was going to start over and make another YouTube channel, I'd probably call it One Cheap Son of a Gun or Ballin' on a Budget. I really like to save my money, and using old used belts for that is a very good thing to do because it wrecks the belts. Once I have that done, I'm taking this old crappy belt off and I'm going to replace it with a brand new-ish
You cheap bastard.
belt. This is a 3M Cubitron belt, and these belts rock. This one has gone through probably 3 or 4 knives and it still has life in it. It is more expensive, but man, is it worth it because it just holds up a lot longer. So anyway, I'm always looking for ways to save money, and this is certainly one of them. And with just a few more passes, you can see we're starting to lay the foundation of the hollow grind. This is a pretty important step as you're wanting to kind of set the entire bevel uniformly, because then once you do, you can just go up to the belt and find the groove, and the knife will want to stay in the groove. It'll be kind of weird when you go to pull too far in or pull out. It will sound different and feel different, and so setting the initial grind is important, and then that way you can get a nice smooth bevel all the way up the blade. It's really nice to have the air conditioner going in here because my God, does it ever get hot. But it's relatively loud, so I'll turn it off for just a second. So I am trying to rack my brain on how to put in a fuller on this. I will say, back when I had the Grizzly grinder, I had a small wheel attachment for it. And what was nice about it was you could put your knife up to the wheel like this and grind the spine and such. But if you wanted to use it for a fuller, then you could on that particular one, because I modified it a little bit to be able to stick your knife straight up against the wheel. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's bring you over to the house-made small wheel attachment, which, by the way, is fantastic. I really do like this thing. It is by far superior to the other one, except in this one regard. So if I wanted to do a fuller using this, you can't even get to the belt. Now, I could cut some of this away, and that's exactly what I had to do on my other one, but I really just don't want to do that because it's super nice, and even then I would have to cut away some of the bearing. Now, I could move up to a little bit bigger wheel, but I think I'm just going to avoid that altogether. So that leaves me with the next idea I had, which was using the drill press and putting in a bit like this or something similar. And then that way I could take my knife, lay it flat on here, and just move it back and forth, putting the fuller in that way. Now that may work, but unfortunately all I really have at the moment is this little thing, and I don't think that's going to be a great option. I've seen somebody take their blade, clamp down a piece of metal to use as kind of like a guide rail, and then use an angle grinder to come in and cut it. But then I'm sitting here trying to think of other ways that might be good, and it dawned on me, oh yeah, I forgot I have this thing. So that right there just might get us out of the jam that we're in. You can see it's a pretty small wheel here, and I think for the size of the fuller that we're looking to do, it might just be perfect for this. So I'm going to take a second and figure out how to secure this thing down, and we'll test it out and see if it will work. Well, all right then, here goes nothing. We have the lines scribed on there to kind of hopefully keep it inside of those lines. Just as a reference point, let's go ahead and try to get this done. Alright, so not too bad, to be quite honest. It's definitely working pretty decent. Had a couple of little scuffs up here, just trying to get it situated correctly on the table. If you lean it in or out, of course it's going to kind of wander a little bit. I also was holding the screwdriver down because there's a little bit of play in the arm, and initially it was kind of wanting to bounce around a little bit. But I think if I run my progression through the belts and then go back and sand this part flat, it should look pretty decent. So let's go ahead and continue on and we'll get both sides done. After I got the fullers situated, we move on to the next request that he had, which was putting some texture on the top of the spine. To do that, I used a checkering file, and if you've never used those, they are super handy. They cut straight lines into material, and it didn't take me hardly any time to put that in. Next, we move on to drilling out the holes in the tang. And for this particular build, I decided to use loveless bolts. They work great because they provide a mechanical bond as well as epoxy on top of that for a chemical bond. Here we are moving on to the heat treating of the blade. And I'll be honest, this is where I made a couple of mistakes. And maybe not the way that you're thinking. The actual heat treating went well. I think I made the mistake of trying to do this step too soon. I realized later after I did this that he also wanted a hole in the back of the tang for a lanyard, and I forgot to drill that out before hardening. So off camera, after I quenched this thing, I remembered, oh yeah, I need a hole in the back of the tang. I actually had to anneal the back of the tang to even drill the hole in the steel. If you know anything about etching blades, in particular etching Damascus, you know that etching hardened steel will look different than trying to etch steel that's in its annealed or softened state. And that kind of came back to bite me in the end, as well as this particular step that we're looking at here. This is me cleaning up the blade on the grinder after I have tempered and everything. I think what I am not realizing in this moment is that I did not remove enough surface metal after quenching, and we're about to find out here soon. There's something funky on the blade. So typically I try not to show the finished etch until the end of the video, and that's what everybody does, right? You save the moment of glory to the end. However, we're going to go ahead and show this, and the reason is because I am trying to help educate people as well. And we've run into a little bit of a problem. Now, this does happen every once in a while, because I am still learning as I go. And what do I mean there's a problem? Well, I will pull this out and show you what I'm talking about. So it has been in the ferric chloride now for a couple of rounds, and you can see that it's etching, and the pattern is wicked cool, if I can get it to focus. There we go. You can see lots of stuff going on, and this is exactly what we were hoping for. Something kind of interesting and random, and for the most part it looks pretty cool, except for a couple of spots. There's one here that you can see just isn't quite etching like the rest of the blade, and on the back side you've got kind of a couple of spots, one here and one here. Now, if you think you know the reason why this is happening, feel free to drop a comment with your guess as to why it's etching a little different. My theory is that it is decarburized steel. And I've had this happen to me before on a few other projects, where basically when you're forging and the blade is in the forge and it is heating up, in spots that are towards the surface of the billet or blade, it's getting blasted with heat and it is losing carbon content. And what happens is if you don't grind enough of that off before you make your blade, this is what happens. You go to etch it and it will etch a little different, and that is because of the loss of carbon in the steel. Now, is this a big deal as far as the knife functioning correctly? No, it is not. This knife is rock hard and will cut better than most knives. It is simply just an aesthetic thing. So anyway, I wanted to share that to educate people, especially people who are new to Damascus. I know for me, the first 4 or 5 knives that I didn't have great information, and I was trying to learn by trial and error. And had I known this, I think it would have saved me a lot of time. I still knew this going into this, and I just thought that I ground off enough steel, because I really did. You can see the thickness back here. It was pretty close to the same thickness up front. And unfortunately, I just didn't grind quite far enough. So anyway, the only way to fix this is to bring it back to the grinder, grind more of this material away, and then spend an entire another day hand sanding, which I really don't want to do. But we might have to. I think for now what I'm going to try just as an experiment is to finish etching this thing, and then we'll do a coffee bath and we'll just see if it fixes it or if we can live with the little bit of discoloration. The only way to try is to just do it and see what it looks like. So anyway, just thought I'd give you an update. Hopefully that helps some people out there with etching their Damascus blades. Well, unfortunately, we weren't able to get this thing to etch properly. So I went ahead and already used some sandpaper to try to get rid of it. I went and etched the blade in ferric chloride, then I tried to put it in coffee, and it's just not really helping. In fact, it kind of made it worse. It just pointed out those areas even worse. So, unfortunately, we spent all that time hand sanding for nothing. But at least we know what to do to fix it. So I'm going to bring this back to the grinder, and we're going to thin out the flats. And that's really where the majority of the messed up part is on the flats. So if we grind this back just a wee bit more, then we'll just have to hand sand the flats and we should be good. In theory, my idea made sense, but when I went to grind the flats back and remove more material, it actually changed the shape of the bevels and the darn fuller. So at this point here, I'm realizing I can't grind the flats away without changing the whole shape of the bevels and the fuller, and I'm just going to have to redo the whole darn thing. That is fantastic, isn't it? And I only have a 320 grit belt on this band file. So we fast forward the next couple of days, I get some better belts in that will allow me to skip the hand sanding part in the fuller. I redo the entire blade, hoping that, hey, if I take the time to redo the flats and the bevels and the fuller, we'll be in good shape. And for the most part, it did help quite a bit. It did remove quite a bit more of the decarb layer. It only took me an extra 2 or 3 days to get there. But hey, that's how it goes sometimes. Knife making is not easy, and especially on custom orders where your customer is going to be paying money for something that you make, you want to get it right, or at least as good as you can. So here it is back in the ferric chloride, and you can see for the most part it's etching better. I tried doing this in several different ways, a dark etch, a light etch, with coffee, without, and this is finally where we settle. Alright, so after spending the last, I don't even know now, 5-6 days on this blade and trying to get the etch to come out decent, I think this is about where we have landed. I went and etched this thing multiple times. I tried grinding some of that decarb layer out. You can still see some of it there, kind of on the flat of the blade. And unfortunately, when you do a really strong mix of ferric and a coffee etch, it just really stands out. So I think by doing a lighter etch like this and leaving the blade kind of what I would refer to as a light etch, I think it's going to help kind of blend those areas into the rest of the knife. So I think this is where we are going to leave it as far as the etch goes. It's not the most contrasted etch I've ever done, but you do pick it up fairly easy. And I also think that with the light colored wood handle, it's going to just blend in a little bit better. If we had a really black, dark finish on the blade, and then we put that really light colored wood on there, it might look cool, but I think that this particular etch is going to do the handle more justice. It'll kind of have that old school, traditional Damascus blade feel. So anyway, that's where we've landed. I think we're pretty well good on it. We're letting the oxides continue to set here, and then we'll be moving on to putting on the handle. Let's do it. After meeting up with the customer, I got a trunk load of all kinds of different wood. This is the particular piece that he wants me to use. It is a beautiful piece of figured ash. And he went as far as to kind of tell me where he thought it would be good for the handle. He even marked the wood pieces, face, pommel, ricasso, that sort of thing. So I know exactly what he wants, which is awesome. That's always a good thing when you're making a custom knife, is to know exactly what your customer wants. And he made it pretty easy for me. Here I'm getting them cut out and pretty much just prepared to throw on the knife. Once I finish running them through the bandsaw, I decide to go ahead and glue up a piece of vulcanized paper liner. And that way it just gives a little extra pop of color on the knife handle. Okay, now that we have the handle scales cut out, we're going to go ahead and countersink the holes in the scales. I'm going to be using these Loveless style bolts. Now I have a specialized drill bit here. This is one that I picked up online, and it goes from roughly 4 millimeters to 8 millimeters, and that's going to match this bolt. You can use the depth gauge on your drill press to get the right depth, and really kind of a personal preference. You definitely want the larger part to be sunk down into the scales some. I typically at least go half of the scale. I try to go a little more. You can kind of see there, that's about half or a tiny bit more. Anyway, this drill bit definitely is a must for something like this. Now you can do it with a traditional one, but this pretty much guarantees that your holes are going to line up in the center of your other holes. And I'll show you what I mean here in just a second. Let's go ahead and get these drilled out. So there we go. You can kind of see how that works. It basically uses the previous hole as a kind of a pilot hole, and then sinks the counterpart around there. And we still have probably an 1/8 inch, I would say maybe 3/32 of material left. So I think that that's going to be pretty good. When this is all said and done, you're going to want to not only see the brass part, but also the silver part. And putting them in deep like that will pretty much guarantee that that happens. I've done it on a couple of knives where I didn't go quite deep enough, and it was only sticking in, you know, yay much. And then when I went to shape the handles, I pretty much ground away all of this, and I was left with an epoxy hole and this bolt, and it just didn't look super great. So anyway, that's how you use these. I'm going to go ahead and do the other ones, and then we'll move on. Now, there's lots of benefits to using these loveless bolts. I gotta say, one of the main benefits that I really like is that once you countersink the scales, you can then put them together and profile and shape them as one whole unit. And it really just makes it much easier on you. You don't have to shape and profile them individually or temporarily glue them together. It just makes life a lot easier. Once we get them roughly shaped to the profile, off camera, I decide it's time to glue them up to the actual knife. So we're jumping ahead here to cutting the remainder of the screws off of the side of the knife, and then we jump straight into shaping the handle. And this process was, in comparison to the build, super fast. It probably only took me maybe 30 minutes on the grinder to kind of slowly cut back the shape of the handle, making sure that everything was comfortable, and then really only had to spend, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes hand sanding after I was done. If you're like me and you make knives, and you also make videos of yourself making knives, then you know the pain. It takes a lot of work to make a blade. It also takes a lot of time and work to make a video of yourself making a blade. That takes a lot of time. The whole idea is just crazy. It's a lot of time spent making knives, making videos. And it would be one thing if you were just focused on making a knife, but then to go back and record everything and upload it to your computer and edit it and try to make a video, it's just a lot of work. But by golly, we're getting close. Something else that I just kind of now realized is an unintentional consequence of working with this ash. It is a pretty porous wood, meaning that the grain is rather large. And I'm sitting here trying to clean up the surface of these loveless bolts, and you can tell that the grain has absorbed some of the metal coming off of this as I was polishing it. And it's kind of an unintentional consequence, but it almost looks kind of cool, like it's part of the blade, so to speak. Like the metal from the blade is in the wood. I don't know, kind of cool. He might not like it, as he's a woodworker, and he might be like, dude, you just contaminated the best piece of wood I gave you. I think it's kind of cool. Anyway, let me know what you think. I've got just a little bit more work to do to finish this thing up. We're going to hit it with some mineral oil, maybe some tung oil, haven't really decided yet, but either way, we're going to soak this handle really good with some oil to help prevent it from swelling and moving around since it is not stabilized. And then we'll be putting an edge on it and giving it a test and wrapping up the video. Well, there we go. We have one completed bandsaw blade, Damascus blade. Whatever, you know what I'm trying to say. It turned out wicked cool. It is super beefy in the handle. That is probably 1/4 of an inch thick, maybe a little bit more in the back, and it kind of tapers out towards the tip, leaving it a hair thinner down here in the front. It's got a really nice hollow grind on it, so we still have a ton of beef along the spine, and then it just disappears to a nothing edge down here. It is razor sharp, and I think that this will absolutely cut anything that he is wanting to cut. I also really like the wood that he chose. And now that I have it polished and oiled up, you can see all the figuring in that ash. And I really like the stripes in the handle, especially the metal that got stuck in the pores. I personally think it's kind of cool. It kind of ties the whole knife in. And I really like it. I hope that he will. I think that he will. I guess we'll see. Anyway, for starting out with rusty bandsaw blades and to be able to make something like this that's usable and a custom one-of-a-kind knife, I think is really cool. I know he'll enjoy using it, and I'm excited to give it to him to see what he thinks. Thanks so much for hanging out with me till the end of the video. Appreciate you guys watching. I hope that you learned something in this video. I know I did. Seems like every time I make a blade, I'm learning something different, even if I'm making a similar blade that I made the time before. That's what makes the hobby so cool. Thanks so much, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.